Hello students, I am Dr. L.K. Das, Assistant Professor of Sociology at the Department of HSS, IIT Roorkee. Welcome to another lecture of the NPTEL course Power and Politics in Contemporary India, a Sociological View. This is the objective of today's lecture, in which we are going to discuss Marshall's tripartite model of citizenship, civil, political and social rights, analyze the relationship between citizenship and class inequality, evaluate the role of the welfare state in shaping modern citizenship. This is in continuation with our discussion on nations and nationalism and our last class discussion on how national in India there was a nationalism without nation. And when we discuss about Marshall and his idea about citizenship, we'll see why social aspects are very significant even when we try to look at a concept and notion called citizenship. So now what is Marshall's idea here? So in his work Citizenship and Social Class, Marshall way back in 1949 is looking at some of the foundational ways through which Britain incorporated citizenship while there was social class inequalities persisted. So his innovation was to understand what are the different dimensions of citizenship. That is where he defines citizenship as a status bestowed on those who are full members of a community. All who possess the status are equal with respect to the rights and duties with which the status is endowed. So this is the definition of citizenship for the Marshall. So this is not simply a legal aspect, rather one has to gain full membership. So when Anderson is speaking about nation as an imagined political community, this is where politics comes, because politics gives you citizenship, and within the citizenship everybody is equal. There are no hierarchies within, and if there are no hierarchies, that means they are defined by rights and duties. Every citizen in the country has certain rights and certain duties. That is where we have in our constitution fundamental rights and fundamental duties. But these fundamental rights and fundamental duties are in accordance to basic human equality. All Indians are one and the same. We do not have dual citizenship. We do not have hierarchical citizenship, that certain groups of people are the first citizens, certain groups of people are second class citizens, or certain group of people are third class citizens. There is no hierarchy. We are all one, irrespective of our caste, irrespective of our class, irrespective of our gender, irrespective of our religion, irrespective of our tribal affiliation, irrespective of our regional location. So that is the reason why citizenship is, as a political idea, is also the highly acceptable social idea, because citizenship also comes alongside the idea of enlightenment, the idea of liberty, the idea of equality and the idea of fraternity. Unless and until these three ideas or three notions come together, we cannot have citizenship. But the genius of Marshall lies not only identifying what is citizenship, but also bringing in social factors to it. A social factor like that of class. You remember in the previous class with Aloysius, we had discussed about caste. Here Marshall is discussing class, and is also saying that a democratic setup emerged during a time when capitalism was also emerging. So democracy is equivalent to the emergence of capitalist social order, and how does this capitalism work, will come to it in a moment. But he is now classifying, Marshall is now classifying the historical transformation of citizenship, in which he brings in the civil rights, political rights and social rights. When he said rights, that means they happen to be the different dimensions, or what he calls as elements of citizenship. By including these elements, one becomes a citizen. So, what are the civil rights? It is the rights necessary for individual freedom in terms of liberty, property, contract and justice, which according to him started in the 18th century. Political rights is the right to participate in political power, notably through the voting, and social rights are the right to economic welfare, security and participation in the social heritage, example education, healthcare and housing. Now, when you look at the civil rights, it has its foundation, particularly in the case of England, it has its foundation in the 17th, 18th century England. This is the time when the liberal notion of the property rights was emerging. This was a time when when scholars or libertarians, they argued that the state and society are connected through individuals, and each individual has a right to own property, has a right as an individual to have a specific contract with another individual. So, a society might have different individuals, but these individuals are connected to each other through contracts. These contracts could be social in nature, these contracts could be political in nature, these contracts could be economic in nature. That is another reason why property ownership was very significant for civil rights, and freedom to choose whom to work with, whom not to work with, what kind of work to do, what kind of religion to follow, so on and so forth, became part of civil rights during this period. But as his claims that civil rights aligned closely with capitalist development, that means individualism and market freedom. This is also the time when the feudal order was getting dismembered. So, capitalists wanted workers from the rural areas to come and work for them, and they wanted to treat them not as a group but as individuals, so that each individual is going to be appointed and a contract is signed for him or her to work or participate in the market. If they are considered as a group, that means we are identifying not individuals but groups, and groups could be quite problematic in the way the capitalism functioned in a non-democratic society. So, the Marshall argues that within this format, economic activity did not guarantee equality of outcomes. So, even if somebody is working for 10 hours, 15 hours, 20 hours, does not matter the number of hours. What matters is where, at what station in society, in the hierarchy you are located. So, while legally everybody was free to choose whatever property they could own, whatever work they could do, but in terms of politics, they were not able to decide anything at all. That is when in the 19th century the political rights and political representation became a crucial force, and adult suffrage or universal suffrage became the paramount. That, as we had discussed with Marx, The state and the legal institutions, while providing certain kind of legal rights to individuals, were also quite significant in the way they wanted to run the country, or they wanted to dictate terms to society. So men and women, they struggled to have a say in the way policies are being created and policies are being implemented, and it could not happen without voting rights, and voting rights for everybody. While in the early 19th century, it was only the property men who had the right to vote, but through the different kind of movements, it was made universal. So anybody who has attained a certain age, let us say 18 years of age, is the potentially eligible to register for vote and vote for certain individual or certain party. This way there was some control of the working classes on how politics is determining their own representation. So political rights became interesting here. So when it happened, even when politics became interesting, but it was still done in terms of individuals. So it's not that because I belong to a certain religion, so we have the different kind of or communitarian kind of representation or communitarian kind of suffrage. Rather, one person, one vote, or one citizen, one vote. So the argument now flows here is that after civil rights, you got political rights. But did these civil rights and political rights created inclusive environment for social inequalities? Now, as I have already discussed, or as I have already mentioned about it, at the same time, so when civil rights and political rights were taking ground or taking roots in the British society, they were also growing in terms of capitalist entrepreneurship. Capitalism was also growing in leaps and bounds. So class as a phenomena was also becoming very prominent, neither with civil rights nor with political rights or political representation. Class inequalities were getting worked up. So we had labor movements, we had trade union movements, through which a certain kind of social rights and welfare state was construed. That of course we are citizens of this country, of course we are going to be here the foreseeable future, so we need to have certain rights. Yes, in terms of class, we can understand that there would be certain hierarchies. We also as workers don't expect the manager and the lowest level worker getting the same amount of payment. We don't expect that the means of production is owned by all the groups of people. Let it be with one individual or one capitalist, that is fine. But is this capitalist giving us a minimum standard of living? Are we able to reproduce our families? And when we are able to reproduce our families, are we able to reproduce it with certain kind of dignity? Dignity of education, dignity of health, dignity of housing, dignity of social security, or roti, kapda and makan. So roti, kapda and makan is part of social rights, or nowadays the way it is being said that roti, kapda, makan and internet. These are basic fundamental social rights that a welfare state must provide, because the capitalist is not providing them. And because the capitalist is not providing them, and if the state is not providing them, then there is no reason we have political rights or we have civil rights. what will I do with the freedom to choose my employer when the salary that I am getting is not enough to feed my family? What is the necessity or what is the benefit of political right if I am not able to educate my children so that they can trump the class hierarchies, so that one day somebody who is at the bottom rung of society can also be a capitalist or have a dignified life. So, social justice is something that needs to be taken care of by the rights bestowed upon me, bestowed upon the state as citizen. So, because he is speaking about the context of Britain, so he is also saying that education is central or education is essential, because citizenship requires the right to have been educated as a basis for civil and political representation. If you are, as we had discussed with Partha Chatterjee in his argument about civil society, what did I say that time? Civil society is a domain where the economic activities are happening. Civil society is a domain where legal activities are happening. Civil society is a domain where many of the enterprising works are being done, and all of them are related to education. If you do not have education, that means you cannot participate in the civil society, and if you do not have education, you cannot also participate in the political society. So here political society of the Western scholars and the political society of the Partha Chatterjee are different. You can be illiterate, but you can still be a part of political society. As a matter of fact, if you are illiterate, then only you become part of the political society. Rather than if you are educated, you are aware of your rights, your legal rights, your political rights, so on and so forth, so you become part of civil society rather than just political society. So education is very significant. That is another reason why most of the countries in the global north provide universal free education. In countries like Germany, in countries like Norway, Sweden and others, and Finland, from your kindergarten to your university, you almost have free education. So education is a right, and with this right, you become a full-fledged citizen. And once you are not constrained by loans, when you are not constrained by the heavy burden of financial your financial status, then you can freely think about how you want to get educated, what kind of education you would like to have, and what you are going to do with that education. So many of these countries are highly entrepreneurial because they get very high quality education, which includes very high quality hands-on training on different vocational trades. So even to get the lowest level job in a society, they don't need to be highly educated, because the education they are getting has certain value, which is provided by the welfare state and its institutions. So that citizenship is about living or experiencing a life of dignity. But the problem here is that when you talk about citizenship, it's also related to state, market and class. And the Marshall argues that all of them are in conflict with each other, and because they are in conflict with each other, so access to some of these rights are always fraught with a lot of contestations. That is where the citizenship and contract, they are in conflict with each other, because contract is they are in the market situation, whereas status that you have is the status of citizenship. Your labor contracts determine your wage, conditions and status, whereas as citizens you have non-market entitlements like a living wage, social security and education. And mind you, he's talking about these aspects in 1949. He's not talking about them in 2025. So when I'm speaking about this, you might be finding it quite funny. What is this called living wage? What is this social security? What is this free education? We have not got any free education. We don't have any social security. We don't get any living wage. We'll be happy if we are getting any wage at all. What about these trade unions? Is he speaking about something that is in outer space rather than here on earth? So that's the reason why I am saying that we need to look at it that he is speaking about welfare states, a state which is trying to mediate between the two, between the citizens as well as between the workers. And when we are talking about Pulantas, when we were talking about Althusser, if you remember, we had discussed about it, how the state, the capital S, tries to mediate the relationship between capitalism, capital C, or the bourgeoisie and different classes, or let us say workers. So the negotiation that happens, it always happens between them within a certain field. So state became welfare state so that the inequalities that are being created through capitalism can be negotiated, its edges can be smoothened. Without that, we'll all become industrial citizens, and these industrial citizens could or could not or would or would not have the many rights except a few of them. But as a citizen, you are not only expected to have rights, you are also expected to have duties. And when you have duties, you have to fulfill them. Otherwise, you cannot become a full-fledged citizen. So when there is a call for duty, you have to join the military. When you are part of a certain society, certain country, you have to pay taxes and other kind of civil responsibility that are given to you from time to time. So maybe you can search internet after reading this and read out what are the fundamental duties we have, and most importantly, not only go through what are the fundamental duties we have, but also go through what are the fundamental rights we have. And while you are doing so, check out whether these two are in contradiction to each other or they feed into each other. So when you see the contradictions between the two or the similarities between the two, write a short note why you feel that to become a citizen you need to have both the fundamental rights as well as fundamental duties. As this is the last class for the week 4, so we will ensure that, or I will ensure that this is part of your question for this week. And at the end of this week, we will also have a live interaction session in which any doubts you have, me as well as the TAs that are available, they'll try to address them and try to see that most of the doubts or questions that you have, we can look at them. So citizenship, as I said about the state, is also about negotiating between class and class conflict. So now when we look at Marshall's work and when we look at the work of Aloysius, we see that he's saying the citizenship can be part of both social, political and civil. And even though one becomes a political citizen, one becomes a civil citizen, but the social conflict, social issues always remain, because that is the kind of inherent to any capitalist society. Whereas on the other side of what we see is that Aloysius is not so either mystified by the idea of citizenship or not disillusioned by the idea of citizenship. So, in the case of Marcel, the role of the state is only to manage conflict, which is arising out of this citizenship struggle or this political and civil struggle. Whereas for Aloysius, it is primarily that there is a potential for emancipation, because he is not talking about class conflict, he is talking about caste conflict, he is talking about gender conflicts, he is talking about communal conflicts. And his argument is not just about the one citizenship, it is also about the different layers that are there within particular citizenship struggle. So, from above, all of us can actually look at it and say, oh, we are all citizens of India, or oh, we are all citizens of Britain, or we are all the part of certain country or other in terms of citizen. But when the surface is visible, what is hinting at is that we also need to look at what is beneath that surface. What are the different kind of conflicts that are there? But he's also bringing certain kind of hope in terms of an ideology of emancipation, in terms of annihilation of caste, in terms of gender equalities, in terms of doing away with communal forces, so that when we identify political citizenship in terms of the idea of nation, we have a more egalitarian notion of nation, in which there would be certain form of class conflict, but this class conflict would not be a death blow to the idea of nation itself. So, Marcel's genius is about creating social or speaking about social class and social rights as part of this universal idea of citizenship, because most of the dominant forces, most of the hegemonic forces would not like to speak about social class as a as a as a progressive way through which citizenship can be understood, through which citizenship needs to be understood. So, these are the few discussion questions that I have, and then how we can discuss some of these questions in our live discussion as well as on the forums. And this is the work from where today we have this discussion. Thank you.